Live. If you're not familiar with the show, we broadcast on 3 different platforms mainly: Facebook, LinkedIn, and of course the home base where you should be is on YouTube. That's where I monitor the chat. That's where we post clips of this show. But right now we're waiting for the stream to fire up on all cylinders. And we're online. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Watching the Watchers Live. My name is Robert Gruler. I am a criminal defense attorney based in Scottsdale, Arizona. My team and I, over the years, we've helped literally thousands of people facing criminal charges. And in our journey, over the course of representing all of these people, we have seen a lot of really terrible things happen. Really disgusting behavior from everybody involved in the criminal justice system, from judges to prosecutors to, of course, the police officers, to politicians, to city council members. Basically, anybody who is involved in the criminal justice system, they have a role to play. There's a lot of bad defense attorneys also, believe me. But what we do on this program is we want to hold them accountable. We want to watch the watchers. These people have been elected, they've been hired, they've been put in office to protect us, to protect our citizens, to ensure that there is justice that is taking place. And unfortunately, that just doesn't happen as much as it should. There's a lot of miscarriage of justice that we see on a routine basis. In other words, there are a lot of really bad guys out there. They're masquerading as good guys, and they're doing it behind a gun and a badge. And so on this show, what we want to do is expose that. We want to shine some sunlight on the criminal justice system, because that is really the only way that we're going to see some reform. People like myself, other defense attorneys, we've been in and out of the courts for years. We've been negotiating. We've been, working on petitions and signing documents and doing all of these things. But the system is not going to change unless there is some pressure from you. That is the non-lawyer, the non-person who's charged with a crime, the everyday regular voter, the person who is living in this society. It's up to you to put some pressure on our institutions, on the people who are involved in our criminal justice system. Without you, nothing is going to change. And so I would love for you to subscribe to this channel. I'm doing my part, my best to sort of bring you some news and help kind of congregate people around the idea that this is possible, but we need you to be here to do that. So if you're here, awesome. Thank you so much for being here. If you're watching this on a later recorded stream, hello, welcome to you also. Hit the subscribe button, leave a comment or thumbs up the video. You know the YouTube routine. It does help us and it keeps us inspired to continue to bring this show to you. So thank you so much for that. Now, I want to give you a quick outline of the show. Before I do that, a little bit of a show change. In previous shows, if you're kind of a regular here, what we do is I typically will have a PowerPoint made up, or I'll just kind of scroll through my notes. Sometimes I've done it on hand. Sometimes I've done it on just kind of bouncing around the websites. I haven't figured out a style that I like quite right just yet. So today we're going to do it a little bit differently. I'm actually going to use a different piece of software, and we're going to kind of go through my notes together. And I've clipped some things that I find interesting and not interesting. And we'll go through that. So bear with me if there are any technical difficulties. I appreciate it, but I'm just trying to find a style that works for me and of course for you, because I want to convey this information in the most transparent way possible. There's a lot that gets left out on news articles or even in video clips. Videos can lie to us. News articles can lie to us. If the year 2020 has told us anything, it's that the data is really kind of bad. Everywhere we look, data is bad and the information is bad. So I'm sort of showing you how I kind of organize this data, and then you can follow along with me. So let me give you an outline of the show today. So of course, we need to talk about the George Floyd video. This is something that for some reason, from what I have seen, has not gotten a lot of attention. I do have copies of the 2 video. We're going to scrub through them a little bit. I don't want to spend a lot of time watching them because they're actually really hard to watch. So I'm going to just tell you a little bit about what my thoughts are. We're going to highlight a couple things. There are some interesting takeaways that we can pull out of the video, and so I want to show you some of that. We've got some stuff to talk about in Los Angeles, in LA. The LAPD, the LASD, the Sheriff's Department, the police agencies there, they have a problem with gangs, and it's not the type of gang that you would think about, right? It's not the Bloods, it's not the Crips, it's not these street gangs, running drugs or whatever you see on the movies. It's a different type of gang, and it's a big problem. We're going to dissect that when we get to that segment. And then, of course, we've got a badpopo. We've got a bad police officer out of the NYPD. We've got a bad prosecutor. We've got a bad pro. So we got a prosecutor who has been totally caught red-handed breaking the law. And then, believe it or not, On this show, we even have a bad politician, but this time it's a bad president. That's right. You probably know who I'm talking about. These documents came out in Epstein's document dump that came out between just last week. So we're going to dive into all of those things. And then, of course, at the end of the show, we're going to leave you with the meme of the week. So let's dive into it. We want to start with George Floyd. So George Floyd, this is something that is one of those things that's actually difficult. It's difficult for me to even talk about it, because one of the difficulties here is that it is really hard to watch. This is kind of the culmination of everything that is wrong with the police system, with our justice system, with how the police interact with people. And we've got a man who is scared to death. I want to run through that. And we've got a police who are just sort of indifferent to human life. We've got somebody who is very clearly disturbed, whether that's drugs or alcohol, or whether that is just a mental problem. He's very clearly disturbed in everything that we see. Now, just as a reminder, remember what we saw when we take this back a couple months, when all of this originally happened. We saw this from sort of the outsider's perspective. We had the people with their cell phones who were recording, and that's all that we were able to see. We could see from their perspective. We saw that officer, Derek Chauvin, with his knee on George's neck for 8.5 minutes, and he's sort of slowly dying before our very eyes. But we didn't see what led up to that. We just saw that sort of horrendous scene. And so what these videos show they're actually from the body cameras, from the officers who were there. And so I want to show you what we're going to be looking at. So these are the two officers. I have them circled here in red. This is Officer Kung with a Keung and Officer Lane. These are the two people who are actually showing up. They're responding to the scene. So we're gonna kind of join them right as they're approaching George Floyd's car. The other two, Derek Chauvin and who's the other guy? Oh, Officer Thao. These two guys showed up after the fact. You remember Derek Chauvin? This is the picture, of course, of George Floyd before he was killed by Derek Chauvin, and they came upon the scene after the fact. So specifically, we're looking at body camera from these two guys. Now, it's a weird situation because I haven't really dug into the specifics about what's happening with these body camera. They're sealed. They were not supposed to be released to the public. They were somebody sort of in secret was recording them with their cell phone. So when we watch these videos, it's not even the actual video file. Somebody's watching the video on a computer screen, and then somebody's taking a recording of that, which if a video or evidence like that, it's called discovery in criminal law. If that stuff is under seal, if that stuff is not to be released, what that person was doing, they were recording it, that's a huge no-no. I mean, you can't do that. What'll happen in these types of situations or these types of cases is they will set up these little stations for defense attorneys to go into and view certain evidence. And so think of this like in a child pornography case, right? It's a very difficult thing for a criminal defense lawyer to have to do. Many criminal defense lawyers have kids, and kind of thinking about these situations or these types of crimes is horrendous. And, we have to work with the government to not provide this information, this discovery. We do not want it to get out. So, and I'm in agreement with that, right? I don't want that out either. So the idea is that they're not just going to give you the file. The prosecutor's office, the court, the police department, say we're representing somebody who's been charged with child pornography. They're not just going to say, oh, well, here's all the pictures we found on this guy's computer, so we're just going to send those over to you via email. They're not going to do that, because if those get into the wrong hands, it's more child pornography that's out there on, wherever you find it on the internet, and it's going to be spread around, and these things are traded like, collector cards and stuff. I mean, it's really kind of gross, disgusting things that are happening. And so we want to stop that. We don't want to be a part of that. So what they'll do is they will actually set up a viewing room, essentially, right? They'll have a computer, they'll have a laptop. The defense attorney or attorneys or expert witnesses, we can go into those rooms. It's not only with child porn, it's a lot of types of cases where we're going to go in and actually view the evidence in sort of a controlled environment where nothing can be taken in or out. And that's kind of what this looks like to me. It looks like they set up sort of a room, and somebody went in there and was watching these videos and decided this stuff needed to get out. So they just took their camera on their cell phone and just started recording the computer screen. So it's kind of one of these things that's in a questionable area. So I got the videos from the Daily Mail. They're public. Somebody leaked them to that website. And so I pulled the videos from them because I don't know what a lot of these different social media sites and things are doing with it. I do not want to play the video in the entirety. I don't want to do that anyways. But I will kind of jump around and we'll go through some clips of it so you can see some of what I am talking about. So let's actually dive into it. Before I do that, though, I want to just kind of call your attention to something that I thought was very clear to me throughout the entirety of the video. And we saw this when we saw the original bystander footage back a few months ago when George Floyd was originally killed. He was scared to death. I mean, absolutely just petrified throughout this entire altercation. Doesn't matter if he was on drugs. Everybody from the other side is coming out. He's on drugs. Of course, he's out of his mind. It looked more than that to me. This wasn't somebody who was just kind of high, spazzed out on drugs. This was somebody who has a history with the police and is scared to death of them. And we can see that from the very beginning. So here is a quick screenshot of one of the earliest interactions with the police department. So this is Officer Lane, this fellow right here, who comes up to his car and is kind of tapping on the window with his gun or his flashlight. And he's got his gun drawn already. There's going to be a quick kind of back and forth between Officer Lane and George Floyd. And just look at George's face. I mean, he is scared to death. And he should be. He should be. There's a gun being pointed at him right on the side of the road. And as we're going to watch, as we listen to this also, it's really hard to hear a lot of the communication that's going on between the officer and George Floyd. And so, traditionally, the officer will walk right up and they'll just say, do you know why I stopped you? Do you know why I pulled you over? Do you know why I'm here? Do you know, and it's kind of a real clear delineation of what this is all about. And it's hard for me to capture that from what I watched. I watched this twice. Hard for me to really pull out a clear, concrete example of communication from this officer. We just don't see it. George Floyd is also, I mean, he's petrified after they actually get him out of the car. He's devastated. I mean, he's very, very upset. He's emotionally totally out of sorts, and he is saying things. We've got some quotes from the article. Again, this is from the Daily Mail. They do a great job kind of putting these things together. He says that, couple quotes. He says, the officer says, I believe so. We found a pipe. We found a weed pipe. There might be something else there like PCP or something like that. When George Floyd is sort of wailing that he can't breathe, they say, you're fine. You're talking fine. Floyd replies to that, I'll probably just die this way. He says, I'm through. I'm claustrophobic. My stomach hurts. My neck hurts. Everything hurts. I need some water or something, please. The officer responds to him. Then stop talking. Stop yelling. That's Derek Chauvin replies that. He says, it takes a heck of a lot of oxygen to talk. And so as Floyd stops moving, people start yelling at him. And that's kind of where we pick it up, right? It's where we saw it back when this happened originally a few months back. And he passed away right in front of our eyes. So there was a lot of fear, a lot of horror. He says multiple times throughout this entire altercation that he's just petrified and he's essentially scared to death. So with that backdrop, understanding sort of this level of fear, let's take a look at the actual video. And I'm going to scrub through it a little bit. I'm not going to play the whole thing, which kind of coincidentally, I think is 8 minutes and 38 seconds, which is right around the 8 minutes and 46 seconds, I think it was, that the knee was on George Floyd's neck, which is kind of a strange coincidence, but here it is. So let's take a look. So as we're going through, we're going to see that this officer just taps on his window. Now let's see if we can hear any of the...
Let me see your hand. Please, put on both hands.
Okay, right there. Did you see how long that was? That was about 2 seconds. He taps on the window, and then he's got his gun drawn already, and he's shouting at him, hands, let me see your hands. Let me see your hands. and the gun is already drawn in his face. So let's watch that one more time, because this, I think, is pretty important. This sets the tone of the entire altercation. His gun is already drawn, and George Floyd is still in his car. So based on what we see, I mean, the video starts right now. I can't really presume that anything happened before this, that they already had a conversation and that George Floyd left, or that he knew what this was all about, or any of that. This is like put yourself in this position. What if you were just stopped randomly by an officer? He's tapping on your glass and his gun is in his hand, and as soon as you open the door, he's screaming, "Hands, hands, hands," and puts the gun right in your face. How does that start an interaction? It's not good. Anybody in that position is going to understandably be scared to death, like George Floyd was. Let's take a look. I just rewound that clip. Let's go back to it and dive in.
I see your hands.
Damn, man.
Stay in the car. Let me see your other hand.
I'm sorry.
Let me see your other hand.
Please,
Both hands.
do nothing.
Put your
Gun.
hands up right now. Let me see your other hand. Put your hand up there. Put your hand up there. Hands on the wheel. Hands on the wheel.
All right, so that goes on for a little bit longer. It's a lot about the hands in the wheel. A lot of, I don't see anything there that would be threatening. He didn't have anything in his hands. He's totally out of sorts, right? He thinks he should get out of the car, and then he says, "Stay back in the car. Let me see your hands." He pulls both of his hands up like this. He puts his hands on the steering wheel, and so this is going to go on for a little bit. And does the officer explain what this is all about, or what's going on, or do anything to calm him down, or to put his gun away, or to say, look, I just have to ask you a couple questions. Don't freak out. I'm sorry. Let's figure this out. Does any of that happen?
Walt's in the car. Put your foot back in.
I'm so sorry. God dang, man. Man, I got shot the same way as I was before.
Okay, well, when I say let me...
Yeah, so he says, I got shot again. I got shot the same way as this. His gun's out the whole time, and he's just not a threat. The officer can see both of his hands. We're going to see here in a little bit that the other two people who were in the vehicle with George have already been pulled out. So this officer just has a gun in his hand pointed directly at George's head. I don't see a threat here. If you see a threat and you see why that's justified, you should probably go work for the police department. They probably agree with you.
Let me see your hands. You put your hands up.
I'm so sorry.
You got them?
Man, dang, man.
Put your hands on top of your head.
Last time I got shot like that was I was...
Hands on top of your head. Hands on top of your head. Step out of the vehicle and step away from me, all right? Step out and face away. Step out and face away.
He's crying.
Please don't shoot me. Please, man.
Please don't shoot me.
Step out and face away.
I'm gonna get out of eye, man. Please don't shoot me, man. Please, man.
All right, so he's very clearly afraid. Please don't shoot me. Please don't shoot me. He says, I'll look at you eye to eye. I'll look you right in the eye, man. Just please don't shoot me. And this officer is just kind of flippant about it, just nonchalant. I'm not going to shoot you, man. Get out of the car. Not going to shoot you. Like, I've done this a million times. This is routine. Almost like he doesn't even care what George is going through, because he doesn't. None of these guys do. And let's keep going.
I just lost my mom, man.
I just lost my mom, he says.
Step out and face away.
Please don't shoot me, Mr. Officer. Please. Don't shoot me,
Please
man.
don't shoot me. Please don't shoot
You're not
me.
shooting me, man.
I'm not shooting you. Step out and face away.
Okay. Please, man. Please. I didn't know, man.
Get out of the car.
I didn't know, Mr. Officer. I didn't know.
All right, so please don't shoot me. Please don't shoot me. I just lost my mom. I don't know, Mr. Officer. He's trying to be respectful. They pull him out of the car. This goes on for a little bit. So they actually are pulling him out, and so here's the part. I'm going to fast forward a couple minutes. This is where they're talking to his passengers in the vehicle. So the point is, they're not a threat anymore, right? They're out.
It ain't us. We was getting a ride. I just got my phone fixed. It's my ex-man. Adam don't be. It's my ex.
Are you good?
He keeps telling me,
All right, so George is now out of the car. We saw some other pictures here. So, there's a little bit of difficulty getting him out of the car because he's petrified. He doesn't know what to do. You can see him sort of kind of freaking out. I just lost my mom. I got shot like this way. I don't know if those things are accurate or not. It doesn't matter. The man is in the middle of a breakdown, of a nervous breakdown. An officer was just outside of his car with a gun pointed at his head, and he really, to this point, I have not heard an explanation of what this was all even about. George Floyd is just really upset, and he's really concerned. And so we flash forward here a little bit. There's a lot of conversation that's taking place between this officer and these two passengers. I think this was an ex-girlfriend. This was a friend who were also in the car. And we're gonna, when we scrub around, basically what they're doing is they're moving George Floyd from one location from his car into this car over here. So they're going to be bringing him back over here. This is the police vehicle, and they're going to put him in that vehicle. So we kind of get over there, and they go through this situation where they're trying to get him in the car. And we see some screenshots. Some of those screenshots that I was sharing with you are from this scene. And we're going to see again, right? This is George Floyd 100% just petrified of what's about to happen to him. I mean, he starts saying things like, I'm going to die. I'm claustrophobic. I'm going to die. I'm going to die. Like, I can't take it. The anxiety is so high, whether he's on drugs or not. I mean, this is a person in the middle of a breakdown, of a catastrophic breakdown. And so there's a really callous part of our society, for some sick reason, that thinks that people who are addicted to drugs are sort of like subhuman, like they don't matter anymore. Well, he did that to himself. He took the fentanyl himself. He's a bad person. So what are the cops supposed to do? Are they supposed to just let him go? Or are they supposed to do what they did, right? And so they kind of go down this road, but it's all predicated on the fact that somebody who's addicted to something is sort of subhuman. They're worthless. They've done this to themselves. There's a moral failing there. These people are sinful. They're bad people. And so we can sort of just treat them however the hell we want. So as we clip through this, you're going to see more and more of that. You're going to see these officers, and he says, please don't put me in there. Please don't put me in there. They're like, get in there, man. You're going in the car. Don't care. We're going to put the windows down for you, all of that type of stuff. And George is very, very, very freaked out, as he should be. He knew where this was going, right? He knew that this was going to be something that got really, really bad, and he was right. He was right. They were wrong. So let's pick it up.
Stay on your feet and face the car door. Please. Please. Get out the door, man.
Man, please.
Please, let me talk to you, please.
Please let me talk to you.
We're not going to listen to nothing you're saying.
Can you watch that car? Just make sure no one goes in it.
I hear you, but you are going to face the door right now.
Listen up. Stop.
I'll do anything. Anything y'all tell me to do, man. I'm not a resistor, man.
Yeah, they do it. They check his pockets.
You can ask him. They know me here.
Check that side.
They know me here.
Man, I won't do nothing like that, y'all. Why is it going on like this? Look at my wrist, Mr. Officer. I'm not that kind of guy.
The other side.
Mr. Officer, I'm not that kind of guy.
Stop.
Please. I'm not that kind of guy, Mr. Officer. Please.
All right, so he's pleading with them, please, please, please. I'm not that kind of guy. He's very afraid. As we clip through the rest, so they're going to have this conversation by the side of the car. They finally open the car door, and they're trying to shove him in there. I mean, he really does not want to get in the vehicle. So let's pick that up.
Man. I didn't know I was going to happen, man. Please, man. I just want my hands free. I don't want none of y'all, man. Nothing.
You got it inside in your pocket real quick on your shirt?
That people do.
Good. I'll roll the windows down, okay?
I'll roll the windows down, okay?
I'm going in, Mr. Officer. I'm going to go in. No, you're not. I got to go in.
Take a seat. Grab a seat, man.
Mind, I don't believe me, Mr. Officer.
Take a seat.
I'm not that kind of guy. I'm not that kind of guy, man.
Take a seat.
Y'all, I'm going to die here.
Take a seat.
I'm going to die, man.
I'm going to die.
Right now.
And I just had COVID, man. I don't want to go back to that.
Okay, I'll roll the windows
I just had COVID. I don't want to go back to that.
Dang, man.
Listen.
I'm not that kind of guy.
I'll roll the windows down and
Please,
you put
man.
your legs in, all right? I'll
Y'all
put the air on.
stop. Look at that. Look at that.
Not even listening.
Look at it. Look at it.
We can fix it,
Look.
but not while you're standing out here.
Okay, man. God, y'all do me bad, man. Man, I don't want to try to win. I don't want to try to win. I don't want to win. I'm claustrophobic.
I don't want to win. I don't want to win. I'm claustrophobic. I'm not that kind of guy. Please don't do this to me. You're all doing me bad, is what he says. I mean, you can see it on his face. This guy is petrified. And the cops are, 4 guys just kind of, you're going in there. You're going to be shoved in there. And whether you like it or not, And they attempt that. So this goes back. We're going to see them continually try to struggle to get him in. One of the officers goes around the backside of the car to try to pull him in. I want you to notice what happens with his hands. So his hands are already behind his back. They're already handcuffed. Now, you know, if you put your hands behind your back and you try to raise your arms, you know, up behind your neck, you're going to dislocate your shoulders. They don't go that way. You can't, you know, do a loop around your head with your hands clasped. And so one of the officers is pulling him, and you're going to see that they're actually pulling, you know, his arms, kind of pulling them up and out. It's very painful. If you've ever done any mixed martial arts, you'll know what that feels like. It's not a good feeling. And so the police are doing that. I mean, they're doing everything they can to get him in the car. They're unsuccessful. And then that's when he's out of the car on the other side. So remember that picture that I showed you of Derek Chauvin, the officer, leaning on George's neck. That is from this side of the street, from over here in the video. George Floyd is going to be going into the vehicle this way, and the officers are going to pull him out the other side. So they're going to bring him out to the other side of the video of the vehicle. That's where he's originally going to be placed down. Then there's going to be passerbys who are walking by, and then that's the video that we saw. So they're actually, you know, viewing him with Derek having his neck on George's his knee on George's neck. Let's dive back in.
I got anxiety. I don't want to do nothing to them.
I'll roll the window down.
I'll roll the window down.
When I start breathing, it's gonna go up on me, man.
Pull your legs in.
Okay. Let me count to 3. Let me count to 3 and I'm going in. Please.
Let me count to 3. I'm going in.
I'm not trying to win.
He says, let me count to 3, then I'm going to go in. Let me count to 3, I'm going to go in. He's trying to cooperate, but he's having a breakdown, right? He's having a nervous mental breakdown. Have you ever had a panic attack or an anxiety attack in your life? I think most people have. One of the worst feelings in the world. You literally think that you're going to die. I've had it many times. You know, it's something that you have to work through. It's something that drugs and alcohol will, of course, exacerbate. But this is very common in police situations, especially when you're part of a group that has traditionally and historically been sort of oppressed by law enforcement, right? From George Floyd's view, from his world, the world that he lived in, his version of reality is different than yours and mine. It's not the same. If we think it's the same, then we're going to be missing a lot to this story. We're going to be missing the context. How is he viewing this? From his view, cops kill black people. That's it. So he is looking at this as sort of the grim reapers are upon him. They're pulling him out of his car. They're taking him, putting him in somewhere else, and he's going to be dead, you know, and he knows that. And he actually happened to be right here. He is dead, and the cops are the ones who did it. So he was 100% right. Any of these other commentators I see and hear sort of bemoaning the fact that he was on drugs or alcohol or he was messed up, the guy was 100% right. He got it. He hit the nail right on the head. He was right. He said he was going to die, and they killed him. So drugs or alcohol or whatever, the guy was perceptive as hell. The cops couldn't figure it out. He knew what was going to happen next.
Man, I get on the ground, anything. I can't stand this, man. He know it.
Okay, so we're going to go around the other side. So this is Officer Lane. Now he's going to pull him through the vehicle. So watch.
I'm claustrophobic. I'm telling you, but you're not working with me. God, I'm claustrophobic, man.
I'm claustrophobic. Please don't. This goes on for a little while. So he's now finally getting in the car. Now, see his hands behind his back? He's getting yanked on him. Oh, yeah. Ow. Right there. That is very painful. Now, George Floyd's going to come all the way out the other side. Okay, now he's back on the other side. He's coming out of the vehicle. And then they get him on the ground. So this is where it all sort of picks up. So now the passerbys. All right, it becomes kind of difficult to watch at that point just because we're not seeing anything. The actual body camera is sort of being obscured by all of the officers who are piling onto George Floyd. And so that's kind of the rest of that officer's video. The other video is really, you know, a lot more of the same. So we have Officer Kung, I believe. We have his body camera footage. Also, it's a lot longer. It's about 18 minutes, but it doesn't really reveal, I think, much else that we need to see. You know, it's basically the same thing from a different angle. He talks to a few other people, and it's not good. Now, the one thing that does come out of that video, and this is something that the Daily Mail actually picked up on, is as this is all happening, we see from Officer Kung, so we see from this gentleman, and I want to make sure we know who it is. We see from this fellow right here, this is Officer Kung, who you may remember, he's actually been called out in grocery stores and things like that, right? Remember that guy? This guy's picture right here, he was in, Whole Foods or something like that shopping, and some lady came up to him and, why are you here? Nobody wants you here. What are you doing in here? You killed that man. Like, get the hell out of here. And I'm not an advocate for blowing people up in grocery stores, but I do really despise the fact that a lot of these officers, they try to hide behind the mask of anonymity, and they shouldn't be able to do that. This guy was charged with a crime. This guy killed somebody who was involved in a killing of somebody else. And many times they just sort of skate away. And I've got other articles that I want to get to today. I'll show you where the actual officers are, they're named, but there's no pictures, there's no identifying information. They do it to hide from accountability. So I just like to make sure that we know who these people are. And so Officer Kung is now, he's got his own body camera footage. I did not go through that, but as he is in this entire incident, so take a look at what the Daily Mail was able to screenshot and capture. Here is George Floyd on the ground. They just pulled him out of the other side of the vehicle, right? So he came out of the vehicle from this angle, so this door area, right? He's pulled out of the vehicle right here. They pull him out and they lay him down on the ground right here. And Officer Kung sees, there's a pebble. Well, there's a pebble in my police tire. Well, that's out of place. I don't like when things are out of place. I like things to be orderly. I like things to, follow the rules and follow the law. So what does he do? He picks it up, he pulls it out of the tire, and he just flicks it away. So when you watch that actual body camera footage, that's what he's doing. Meanwhile, by the way, George Floyd is just laying here right here. That looks like somebody's neck or knee or something like that on his neck. So in other words, somebody is being murdered right in front of this officer, and he's concerned about picking a pebble up out of a tire. Like, this is how routine this is. This is how desensitized these people are to this entire process. We have a man who's having a mental breakdown, an emergency. He's saying, I'm going to die, and he's right about that. But as this is all taking place, he just goes and he just picks up a little pebble. Oh, well, that's inconvenient. Let me get rid of that. Meanwhile, a man is dying right in front of your very eyes. And so right now there's a lot of commotion. There's a lot of conversation that's taking place about, well, what does this mean? Are these guys actual murderers? Did they go out there with, this premeditated intention that they're going to go kill somebody? And a lot of the commentators are sort of saying no, right? There's no evidence of that. There's no indication that this is what they were doing or what they were involved with. And I happen to agree, right? I haven't seen any facts that said that any of these guys woke up and said that they're going to go kill George Floyd or somebody today. Like, there's just no evidence about that. But there are other types of murder. Okay, just because it's not premeditated doesn't mean that it's not murder. There's all different categories of murder: first degree, second degree. You've got, manslaughter charges and all those different things. But you've got, somebody dies, there are criminal charges related to that. I've already gone through the statutes for these particular officers. I covered that in a previous show, and we're not going to do that again today. But as I was watching this pebble incident, this situation where an officer just picks up a pebble, throws it out while this chaos is going on in front of him while somebody is dying, it reminded me of a particular charge that we learned about in criminal law in law school. It was this idea of what's called depraved heart murder. Okay, so this was this concept that actually has a Wikipedia article here if you want to look it up. But it says that it is known as depraved indifference murder. It's a type of murder where an individual acts with a depraved indifference to human life, where such act results in death. Not explicitly intending to kill, but it was so bad, like it was the risk of death and bodily harm is great enough that ignoring it demonstrates a depraved indifference to human life, and the resulting death is considered malice aforethought. So in other words, malice aforethought is sort of the predicate for murder. If you have malice aforethought, that means that you had thought. It's an old phrase from Old English, but it basically means you thought about killing somebody. You had intentional desire to you had malice in your mind and you thought about it prematurely. So this is kind of an old concept, depraved heart murder. A lot of these originated in sort of the old tradition of law. They've now been codified, and there now are statutes: first-degree murder, second-degree murder, manslaughter, vehicular manslaughter. All of those different things have been categorized, but this is one of the originals. So this comes back from sort of the common law study, what they were doing in England, this idea that you can still murder somebody by just showing just a total indifference to human life. And the article here says that in some states it constitutes second-degree murder, while in others it would be charged with varying degrees of manslaughter or third-degree murder. So it's a murder charge. And that, when I saw this video, that this is exactly what I thought of. I don't remember what the specific statute was in George Floyd's case or what these guys were particularly charged with. Already covered that in a previous show. But here, it just sounds like it fits. These guys were so calloused. They said, we'll put the windows down. You're going in, do what I say. And they pull him out by the back of his shoulders, kind of dislocating his shoulders in real time, throw him on the ground. And while this is all happening, while he's pleading for his mom, while he's saying, I can't breathe, while he's begging for water, he picks a pebble up and just tosses it away. If that's not an indifference to human life, if that's not, if that's not murder, I don't really know what is. So whether they call it first degree or second degree, that is going to be up to that court and that location and that particular jurisdiction. But the video is pretty bad. I don't think that it helps the government in any way. George was very upset, and rightfully so. And if anybody made a guesstimate on how this was going to go out, if they made predictions, George Floyd was the only one who got it right. Drugs or not. So we're going to see if they're actually held accountable. Now, is there a different way to handle this situation? Could these cops have done something differently? Because this is what I hear all the time from cops or from people who love the cops, the pro-cop supporters. Well, they're dealing with hardened criminals. They're dealing with people who want to kill them. They're dealing with, lunatics and criminals and addicts and gang members and all of these things on a constant basis. And so they're just acting the way they have to in order to get the job done. And I just think that's way too overbroad. You can't treat everybody the same. That's something that is sort of baked into just, good manners in a regular everyday society. I mean, we're always constantly ragging about stereotypes and racism and prejudice and prejudging people. And so for the cops to just show up on every single scene and just treat everybody like a criminal or a gang member is an insane way to do it, because most people are not that. Most people that the officers interact with are getting speeding tickets. They're getting slaps on the wrists. They're doing a welfare check. Most people are not these hardened criminals and insane, criminal masterminds. That's not the norm. The norm is the other way. So the norm, in my opinion, should be that we deal with people as people. We deal with addicts as people who are in a lot of pain. They're suffering. They're struggling. They need help. They don't need to be, manhandled by 4 officers and thrown in the back of a vehicle. So when I hear, defund the police, that is something in my mind that makes no sense at all, right? Doesn't make any sense, which is kind of a weird thing to be, for me to be saying. Like, why is a criminal defense attorney saying that defund the police is not a good idea? Because there is a place for them. There is a place that we need the police. They need to be doing what we need them to be doing. But what about these ideas of other entities or other divisions of a police department that is capable of engaging somebody like George Floyd, right? Or we've covered it many times. Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery. We covered it with Rayshard Brooks. We covered it with a lot of these people. Almost all of them. What if somebody came up to them and just said, listen, cop goes up to his window, says, this guy's having a breakdown. He's having a mental health crisis. We need to call somebody else who's better equipped to handle this situation. You bring in a nice, man or woman, somebody with experience dealing with trauma, somebody who's got experience dealing with this particular community, who views somebody with a gun and a badge as somebody who's there to kill them. We bring in somebody else with a different uniform, with a helpful hand. We're not here to arrest you. We're not here to kill you. We're not here to murder you. We're not going to take you to jail today. But we do need to resolve the situation. We need to pull you out of the car. Let's talk. Bring him a chair. Why don't they have a chair for him to sit in? There's a picture of him. They just threw him on the ground. Why are we not treating people with a little bit more humanity? And for those who come back on that and they say, well, that's expensive. That costs a lot of money. How are we going to pay for that? How much is this George Floyd thing costing the entire country and the world? I'm going to get to articles in our next segment about the LAPD or LASD, the sheriff's department, paying out $55 million for bad police officers. They've been sued for that. Bad policing is very, very expensive. You can run the numbers any which way you want to, but the idea that we treat people with more humanity is the better approach. So if anything comes out of these protests, and I still haven't heard a coherent thought on what they're even protesting anymore. I have no idea what they're doing. I thought it was about George Floyd. I thought it was about criminal justice reform. Now it seems like it's about overthrowing capitalism and burning down court buildings. No idea what that is about or what that means. But if there's anything that's going to be good that comes out of this, it's going to be maybe the idea that some of these police departments can treat people with a little bit more humanity and a little bit more compassion, and these types of situations won't have to occur anymore. If that means that it's not these officers who are employed and we bring in other people to do what needs to be done, then that's fine. These officers got to go. But there is a better way to handle it, and that is what I would like to see. George Floyd was a sick man. He had a really, really deep problem. He was distrustful of law enforcement. He had a good reason to be, because they killed him. He was totally vindicated. Unfortunately, it resulted in his life. So I'm really hopeful that there is more development with the movement that has come about as a result of his passing. We'd like to see some more progress, and we're going to keep covering the story, keep talking about justice reform, as long as you'll have us. So that's the end of that story. Thanks for letting me share that with you today. All right. The next story I want to talk about is about secret societies. So I stumbled onto this article. This article came out yesterday. It was written by a guy or gal named Aline Tekmedian. Here's what it looks like. Here's the article. Aline Tekmedian from the LA Times, and it says that the deputies accused of being in secret societies cost LA County taxpayers $55 million, records show. So remember when I was talking about George Floyd, or how much it costs police to bring in some more qualified people to deal with these individuals in mental health situations? It's going to cost some money for sure, but we're already just paying money. In this particular situation, LA is. In Arizona, we paid out millions and millions of dollars when we had that lunatic, Sheriff Joe Arpaio, as our sheriff. He actually is maybe our sheriff again by some sick joke the universe is playing on us in Arizona. But it's very expensive. Bad policing is very expensive, and LA has paid out $55 million to settle claims that are brought about because sheriff deputies belong to secret societies. So here's the crux of the story. When you have these really big police agencies like the LAPD, the NYPD, the Phoenix PD, we're talking about a lot of people, thousands and tens of thousands of people are being employed in these big entities. And what ends up happening, and this article goes through it in some detail, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it, but we'll run through it. As these big bodies exist, you have these, they call them cliques. They call them these little cliques that just develop within the bigger entity. And they've got their own initiation policies. They've got their own requirements. They've got their own code of conduct. You have to go through a certain rite of passage in order to become a member of it. But they keep calling them cliques, and there's these little things that are happening within the LAPD or the LASD. And when you start going through those different factors, like tattoos, like initiations, rites of passage, codes of silence, and all these different things, it doesn't sound like a clique to me anymore. It sounds like a gang. That's the same indicia that they use to identify gangs. So we're not talking about cliques. We're not talking about secret societies. We're not talking about little, communities of friends within the LAPD or the LASD. We're talking about actual gangs. And this article does a great job of actually fleshing that out. Who are these people? What do they do? So let's dive into it. So hats off to Aline Tekmedian from the LA Times. Here are some of the gangs. There were, within the payments from the 55 million, tattooed groups that glorify an aggressive style of policing. There were 60 cases with 8 specific cliques. Now, this article, I said they're going to keep calling them cliques. They're really gangs. We've got the Vikings. We've got the Regulators. We've got the 3,000 Boys. We've got the Banditos. Have you ever heard of these people? You ever heard of these gangs? You've heard of the Crips. You've heard of the Bloods. You've heard of, those things. Have you heard of gangs within the police department, like the Vikings, the Regulators, the 3,000 Boys, the Banditos? I hadn't, but they've been around for decades. Long alleged are the violent, intimidating tactics that are similar in some ways to criminal street gangs, which is exactly right. The sheriff's department turns a blind eye even in the face of a probe by the FBI. It all sort of originated. So this story came from, there was a situation where there were a bunch of deputies from a sort of a graduating class within the LA department, and they were at a party and they were celebrating, and an altercation took place. So what ended up happening is they got into this big brawl. There was a big fight, and the LA Board of Supervisors, they said they wanted to know how much money we've paid out over the years to settle claims that are brought, sort of as a result of these little gangs getting in tussles. And that number turned out to be a big one. It's $55 million. So here is sort of the situation that happened. There was, one deputy was knocked unconscious. They're going to continue to say that there's cliques. So Sheriff Alex Villanueva said that he put measures in place in February to prohibit them from participating in these cliques. But this isn't high school. It was my thought. This is not high school. These are not, high school girls who are being cliquey with one another and bullying each other and saying, oh, Susie said this, and Susie's dating Bobby, and Bobby is this, and blah. It's not like that. These are grown people, grown men and women in law enforcement. They go through an academy, they get certified by the training, and they become an officer, and their job is to go out there and enforce the law. Well, they're forming these own little gangs within their own police departments that many people are not even aware of. We have the Inspector General, Max Huntsman, says, yeah, that's really neat that Alex Villanueva said all that, but we're aware of no implementation whatsoever because of the obstruction of the sheriff's department. There's been a cover-up, and more than 20 deputies present during that original brawl were not required to give statements. So in other words, they're not investigating themselves. They know that all of these officers went into, one specific party. They got into a brawl, halfway investigating themselves, but they're going to, they're investigating themselves. So what level of malfeasance are they going to actually find? We'll see. The IG goes through and he says, the Inspector General, they're talking a lot more about this clique problem and these different cliques that are forming. We've got, let's see here, it says they paid out $10.1 million, went to Francisco Carrillo Jr., who has maintained his innocence, and that conviction was actually it was a wrongful conviction. That actually was overturned very, very recently. They've got these different rites of passage. So there's this group called the 3,000 Boys and the 2,000 Boys at the men's central jail, and they would actually earn their ink. So they get these tattoos that match. They would earn their ink by actually breaking bones, is what this article says. By breaking the inmates' bones is how they would sort of go through their rite of passage. The Executioners clique is another gang that runs the sheriff's office. So they're actually alleging here that one of these gangs just runs the whole department. Basically, everybody's involved in it. This group does not allow any blacks. It does not allow any women. Black and female deputies are not allowed in the clique, in the gang. There are, inking parties that they have. They're involved in illegal arrest quotas. There are threatened work slowdowns. They're sort of dictating policy. So if you know anything about criminal law and sort of the history of police departments and quotas, they're not allowed to have quotas. There used to be quotas. They're not allowed to do that anymore. So they can't go out there and say, we're going to go arrest 1,000 DUIs tonight. Or they're not supposed to. But there are these in the undercurrent of the police departments, there are these quotas that they need to hit. Like, they know what they're doing. They know when they talk through their WhatsApp or whatever they're doing, they know what they're going to be, going after that night. There's also a major blue shield that is taking place. So anybody who actually reports these things gets in trouble. Gonzalez alleges in a claim that members of the gang retaliated against him after he reported that a deputy who belonged to the executioners assaulted a colleague, Thomas Banuelos. The deputy who attacked him warned him not to cooperate with investigators and to lie about the assault, or he would be labeled no good by the clique. So it's that blue shield, it's that blue code of conduct that we talk about all the time. And this is not just one article. This has been something that's been going on for a very long time. We can refer back to some of the things that the article mentions, like these different cliques, these different gangs. We've got the Linwood Vikings. They're a gang in Los Angeles based out of Linwood Station of the LA County Sheriff's Department. There's a gang in LA based at the Linwood Station of the LA County Sheriff's Department. There's a gang in the LA Sheriff's Department, is what this Wikipedia article says, which is pretty hilarious. They're not wrong. Its members have included Paul Tanica, Deputy Sheriff, and LASD Second in Command Lee Baca. So this is an actual gang. There was several lawsuits. A federal judge, Terry Hatter, described by a federal judge. He said they're a neo-Nazi gang engaged in racially motivated hostility, and they're committed to the valorization of Aryans, which is white people. A lot of background. First started in 1971. It originally started as a gang called the Little Devils. There's been other, gangs that have blossomed, the Grim Reapers and others. The Vikings apparently share a tattoo with a symbol of the 998, which stands for officer involved shooting. So if you actually, become a part of the Vikings, you got to be involved in a 998, which is an officer involved shooting. Deputy Mike Osborne told the LA Times that invitation to join the Vikings was considered prestigious, but also meant that you keep your mouth shut and obey the code of silence about illegal activity by other deputies. Osborne and his wife testified about police corruption. They and their children were later shot at in their home by what Osborne believes were disgruntled sheriff's deputies. So again, just more and more blue line, blue shield. If you break the code of silence, there's going to be repercussions for you. Other LASD gangs, the Hats, Little Devils, Jump Out Boys, Grim Reapers, 2,000 Boys, 3,000 Boys, and the Regulators. I could go on and on and on. I have more stories, more clips. The LA Times and other entities have gone through and done a really great job. So if you're interested in this, it's a rabbit hole. You can just keep going and going and going. The Banditos, for example, they're another gang who, again, cliques. 20 of his colleagues had matching skull tattoos. They say that their position on it is it's benign camaraderie. It's a way to boost morale, and it's a free speech right. They have a right to join these gangs and join these cliques just like anybody does, which is true, but you don't automatically get to be a police officer. If you're going to be involved in something like that, you don't get to be a cop anymore. You don't have that freedom. You don't have that privilege. It's something that we can say, cool, yeah, you're welcome to go be in that gang if you want, but you can't be an officer here because that gang's interests go against the principles of law enforcement. But they're going to, of course, stand by their free speech claim. A lot of people try to do that, but it's not a really good claim. The 3,000 clique. So this is a clique that actually operates within a jail or a prison, and they manage the entire the entire floor. That's why it's called the 3,000, because it's the third floor, the 3,000th floor, whatever designation that is. They run that, and they earn their ink by breaking inmates' bones. So they actually break bones. That's how they get that's their rite of passage. Same with the executioners. So here's a picture from the executioners. This is a tattoo that is the gang that dominates the Compton Sheriff's Station. They're saying that this person here broke the code of silence and got a text message that says Art is a rat because they broke the code of silence. They sport the tattoos of a skull with Nazi imagery and an AK-47. They celebrate deputy shootings and the induction of new members into inking parties, illegal arrest quotas, threatening work slowdowns. We've seen this a lot, especially recently. these work slowdowns. You know, officers are now saying, or we're starting to see from these different police departments around the country, why are they not responding? Why, you know, that building's on fire, or they're breaking through that, or they're going into, you know, down here in Arizona, we had the Scottsdale Fashion Square Mall, and the looters and people were just running around through there. Where was Scottsdale PD on that? What happened? Did they get a stand down order, or did they just say, well, we're just going to let it run its course? Was it a work slowdown? Was it a structured order? You know, what the hell happened here? Same that we're seeing around the other parts of the country. If the law enforcement officials who like to get on camera, like to get on TV, like to get on social media and scream that they're making huge sacrifices for everybody, and that everything that they're doing is for the good of the people, and they're just, you know, humble public servants. Well, when we start to say, we're going to hold you accountable for certain things, we really don't like what you're doing as a public servant, so we're going to start to implement some other rules and other things that we're going to ask you to follow. As soon as we do that, they don't like that. That's accountability. That's transparency. Now we're going to be looking at them through a microscope lens, and they don't like that. So how do they respond? Well, they're in contracts. Their union has a contract. They can't really get out of it. They still need the job. So how about this? How about we just don't work? How about when something goes on in society, we just sort of don't respond as quickly as we should. You know, this one was particularly bad because this guy who was alleged to have been a rat, they're saying that they refused to even show up to other calls. So let's say a cop goes and he's involved in a situation that's dangerous and he needs backup. He calls and they say, nope, that guy's a rat. We're not going to go over and help him. He's a rat. He broke the code. Therefore, his life may be in danger. He may be somebody who needs our help. He may need some assistance. They don't show up. That's our law enforcement right there. Now, how would this work in your profession? Would you be okay with secret societies wherever you work? Would you be a part of one where you work? What if that secret society, what if that gang within your organization was a gang that was opposite of the values, opposite of the principles that they're supposed to be for? So I can give you an example from here, right? At our law firm, we like to help people charged with crimes. Good people. We want to get their lives back on track. If there was anybody at our office who wasn't doing that, or who didn't believe in that mission, or if there was a clique or a gang, or there was a group of people who said, you know what, we don't really care about helping anybody. All we want to do is close these cases and funnel them through, and we just, want to make a bunch of money, and we don't care about that stuff. Those people would be fired so fast because they're in violation of our code, of our values, of our mission, of our principles that we have written on our wall here. That's how we run the show. But that's not what happens with these other people, with these other police departments. What if there was a group of doctors who just said, yeah, we're only going to kind of help our patients. We're really not that concerned about their health and well-being. Let's just bill up our insurance rates. Let's get them out of the hospital as quickly as we can. It would be chaos. And what if they had this little group that every time somebody died, or every time something happened, that they got something inked on their arms? Oh yeah, we lost another one to cancer, so I'm going to ink that. I'm going to make a notch right here. That's insane, right? Or if airline pilots did that and they said, well, we know better than the people on the ground. We know better than everybody else. We're going to enforce the law the way we want to do it. We're not going to do the checks. We're not going to do this. We're the pilots. We fly the planes. We know what the skies are like. We know how the clouds work. Those stupid radio controllers, they don't know anything. It's insane. That's what's happening here with the police departments. They're allowing these things to fester. There's been no accountability. The culture is rotten through and through. So for people to sit here and say not all cops are bad, it's just a few bad apples. This garbage has been going on for decades. In the article, there's Wikipedia articles about it. There's 4 or 5 articles about it. They have names. They have tattoos. They have rites of initiation. They have rites of passage. They have codes of silence in our own police departments, everybody. So how do you fix that? Well, with more transparency, with more accountability, with bringing these things to light, with sending this clip, with sending these articles to your friends, to your family, to anybody who lives in LA and says, look, do you know this is going on here? This is going on in your backyard. There are these little gangs of Vikings and 3,000 boys and the executioners who are in the LA police department, the sheriff's office. if there's no pressure there, it's just going to continue to go on. If the politicians don't have any pressure, if the unions are, continue to allowed to exist, they're going to continue to protect these things because they've got so much bargaining power. The unions have the ability to take all of the officers who are part of the union and just walk away and say, no, we're not going to renew our contract. So LA, you're on your own then. So what, of course, the politicians, no, we don't want that. There'll be chaos in the streets. So we're not going to do that. So what do you want to stay? We want your officers, Mr. and Mrs. Union. We want you to stay here. How are we going to keep you here? Well, we don't want you to, to mess around with our cliques or our gangs. We don't want you to log a bunch of our misconduct. We want you to purge our personnel files and our complaints after every 5 years. We want your commitment that you're not going to do anything on qualified immunity and all of those things. So these bad officers get to stick around these police departments, and it is just a boiling cauldron of a disaster. Bad officers stay, they're never held accountable, and these gangs just keep perpetuating. The cycle keeps going on and on and on, and nothing's going to happen about it until you start demanding some change from your politicians, from your local community. This stuff has to change on the local level because it's a cultural problem, and the unions are a huge part of it. All right, the next story today, got our first bad popo of the show. It's going to be a long show. We got our first bad popo here. So here we have, this story comes from the New York Post, from the NYPD officer arrested for the second time in less than a week. So an officer was arrested twice in 1 week. Tina Moore wrote the article August 3rd. And here's what we've got. A New York NYPD cop was arrested for the second time in less than a week on Monday for stealing model cars, clothes, and hygiene products from a Queens Walgreens just days after he was busted for knifing his former girlfriend, police said. So we have a cop who is on the NYPD who stabs his girlfriend, and then a couple days later goes and steals cars, model cars, so not like actual cars, clothes, and hygiene products from a Walgreens. He gets caught twice. He's arrested twice. This cop joined the force in 2015. He's charged with petty larceny and criminal possession of stolen property. He was previously arrested Friday for assault of his ex-girlfriend, 23-year-old ex-girlfriend, cops said. Ibram is just the name of the cop, was honored by the department in 2017 for stopping a man who tried to set a fire at the station, and he has been suspended. Now, what's always interesting about these articles is how difficult it is to actually get them to name the cop. Did you notice that? Did you see why I was scrolling up and down there a little while? Where's the name of this cop? Let's take a look. NYPD cop. Who was it? Don't know. Was arrested. Goes on and on. Knifing his former girlfriend. One of the cars he allegedly stole. The cop. What's his freaking name? We don't get it until the last paragraph of the entire article right here. Ibrahim, who was honored by the department in 2017, has been suspended. Am I missing this? Am I missing this? I mean, I printed the article right out. Why is the name at the very bottom? Why is the name just one name, Ibrahim? We have no idea who this cop is. No idea what his full name is. No idea what he looks like. It's just an article. This is probably a clickbaity article that says, and maybe the author doesn't know. The author may not know at all. This may be all the information that they have. But why is this stuff, not more public, not more revealing? Anytime something happens to an everyday person like you or me, all of our information is on the internet immediately. Do you know that? You can go to a mugshot website. You can go to Arizona Mugshots, and you'll see everybody who was arrested and booked into 4th Avenue jail, their picture, their name, the charges, everything. It's all there on public display. But when it happens to these cops, they hide it. They want to expose you, but they don't want themselves to be exposed. So they'll tell you everything about you. If I got arrested, my name, full name, my mugshot, smile in there would be there. I'd have the charges listed there. But here we have Ibrahim. We know a little bit about him because we know that he was promoted. He was arrested. We know some about him. But the problem is when cops are allowed to hide from this stuff, when they're just allowed to skate through without any identifying information, without any way to hold them accountable. This guy was on the force from 2015. So he's got 5 years of patrolling, of enforcing, of probably breaking the law while he's doing it. The fact that he just knifes his girlfriend and then a couple days later just goes through Walgreens and starts stealing things. Either this guy has a mental problem, he's got an addiction problem, he may be going through something on his own. That's a separate story. He shouldn't be on the police force, and he shouldn't have been on since 2015. Maybe there's some other indications about this guy being a problem. Do we know what his personnel files say? Do we know, does he have other complaints lodged against him? Does he have any pending cases that are still making their way through the criminal justice system? What if a number of people have been charged with crimes based on this guy's conduct, and they don't know who he is, or they don't know about this story? What if a friend was just arrested for a DUI by this guy, and he's just going to proceed forward with his case because he doesn't know any better? He doesn't know that the cop who stopped him and arrested him was just arrested twice in a week, once for stabbing his girlfriend and once for robbing a Walgreens. They don't know that. And if the prosecutor's office doesn't tell them, and if the judge doesn't tell them, then they're just going to move forward with their case, and they're going to plead guilty, or the prosecutor might knock a day off of jail. Yeah, we know this cop has some problems, but they're not that big of a deal. We're still going to convict you anyway. Just sign this plea deal and move on with it. But if we put a bulletin up, we had a national database, and we said this loser cop was just arrested, indicted, charged with 2 different crimes. Here's his picture. Here's his badge number. Here's the area where he patrolled. He was doing laps around this part of New York City, and he was just rounding people up. All of those people would know that their interaction with this guy was really, really bad, and they could do something about it. But now, because everything's so hidden and swept under the rug, and there's a million bad cops, so this story is going to get buried tomorrow. They don't know. This is a problem, and this is why we like to call these people out, because it's just any amount of exposure, anything that we can do to just shine some light on them, I think is what needs to be done. And so, we have a small channel here. Fortunately, I have some people who are interested in the things that I have to say. I appreciate you being here, but it's important that we call these people out, because they just get away with it too much. So Ibrahim, whoever that is, obviously you should be ashamed of yourself. He's suspended from the NYPD. Hopefully they fire him. Hopefully he's blacklisted from law enforcement and we never see him with a badge and a gun again. But I'm not going to hold my breath on that one. All right. Next story I want to cover today is a bad prosecutor. Normally on this show, I talk about badpopo, right? Bad police officers. Every now and then, though, we see a really bad prosecutor. We've been covering one on this show for quite some time. I'm talking, of course, about Kim Gardner. Kim Gardner, remember this woman here? She's a prosecutor out of St. Louis, and she was responsible for bringing charges against the McCloskeys. So that's the couple you see here. We've also covered them on the show, Mr. and Mrs. Rambo, I called them. They had firearms in front of their home as protesters broke through their gates. Watch the past shows if you want to see sort of our analysis on that. We went through it. I think they're totally justified to have firearms. I'm totally 100% in favor of their charges being dismissed, which I think it looks like it's going to happen if that has not already happened. But this prosecutor, Kim Gardner, in one of the most ridiculous things I've ever seen, actually charged them with the crimes. And she came out and made a public statement about it, saying, I don't even know what her logic was. Something about justice, something about freedom of speech, freedom to protest, all of that other stuff. In no way did she indicate, what law they were breaking until she charged them and then charged them. And the charging document's a joke. They lied in the charging document. They said that the gun was operable, and it was not operable. The police actually took the gun that they confiscated from the McCloskeys' house. They tried to fire it, didn't work, and they flipped the firing pin around. They took it apart, flipped it around, put it back together. It works now. Okay, so the gun was inoperable, but you charged them with a crime for having an operable gun. So they totally lied in the story. This person, Kim Gardner, has been flying around the country connected to a group that is basically sponsoring her to travel around. It's called the Fair and Just Prosecution Group. And so she's been flying all over the place. She's been going to Portugal and to Houston and to Selma, Alabama. She took these trips in 2018 and 2019. But she didn't disclose them on her travel reports. So when you're a public official, people want to know what you're doing. Where's your money coming from? Who's paying for these trips? Why are you, Kim, somebody who is traveling to Selma, Alabama, to Houston, to Portugal to talk about prosecution? I understand conventions. I understand all of those things. I love going to those things, but I pay for them myself. I go to those things. I pay for them. I'm not a public official. Also, on top of that, I'm not working these things on the taxpayer's dime. So when she's traveling around to all these different places, who's paying for that stuff? Well, it's an organization called the Fair and Just Prosecution Organization. St. Louis law require that every elected official report their travel, whether it was paid for with public or private funds. She's got to report it. We want to know who's paying for this stuff. If you're going to, different places, different parts of the world, who's responsible for that? Sources tell News 4 that Gardner's traveling was prolific and problematic. They say she was unreachable on trips, making it difficult to get decisions made. So when you're the chief prosecutor for a jurisdiction, you've got a lot of people who need decisions on certain things, charging decisions. I was never a prosecutor, but I know a lot of them. And so, they need decisions on charging. Should we charge this or charge that? Can I offer this plea deal? Should I grant this deviation request? We've got oral arguments coming up on this case. I need your guidance. Who should I assign to that? So there's a lot that needs to happen. If she's, whooshing all around over the world, then it's hard to do her job on that. One of the attorneys, a different circuit attorney, said that the best disinfectant is to have sunshine come in, and that's exactly what I say on this show very regularly. We want to expose some of the misconduct because the general public has no idea what's going on. They don't know. They don't know about the gangs in LA. They don't know about so many things that if they did know about it, they would just be disgusted. And this is one of them, right? This is rules for thee, but not for me. Kim Gardner is going to prosecute the McCloskeys, but she's not going to file her reports as mandated by the law. She's just not going to do it. And when this comes out, when people are bringing this up against her and saying, hey, what the heck are you doing? She doesn't even apologize for it. In fact, she refuses to apologize for it. Here's what she says. Circuit Attorney Gardner refuses to apologize for seeking reasonably opportunities to further her knowledge and access prosecutors from throughout the nation for best practice. This is her whole statement, which it doesn't say anything other than she's not apologizing. She says the circuit attorney is confident the public will see through this veiled attempt to disparage her and her efforts to continue to change our criminal justice system to be more just and fair. So no apology, nothing. Just a bunch of word salad here that a fairer, more equitable justice system beyond the failed policies of the past that created our mass incarceration crisis. Like, it doesn't say anything. That doesn't say anything to me. It's just identifying a problem. But what is the solution? Is it traveling around the world to meet with other prosecutors? Unless you're talking about less incarceration, then I don't think that's the case. And you've just kind of proven yourself totally wrong by filing the dumbest charges in the country against two law-abiding gun owners who are protecting their home, their personal residence, their private property. So if you're talking about a mass incarceration problem, but you're charging people with the dumbest crimes in the country, you're part of the problem. You're not part of the solution. File your paperwork. You're a bad prosecutor, and you should be ashamed of yourself. Funny note on that, a lot of people say that this is a George Soros thing. This article actually mentions that. They say the Fair and Just Prosecution responded saying, well, where does the money come from? Who's paying for that? Who's paying for fair and just prosecution? Who's paying for that? Well, it comes from a number of sources, including a tiny fraction that came from an entity related to George Soros, a billionaire philanthropist. So we've talked about that for a long time on this show. Sort of my speculation when it came to Kim Gardner. I was, why is she charging this? Nobody in their right mind, nobody who reviewed the facts, nobody who reviewed the law, nobody would say, yeah, this is a pretty bad case. This justifies criminal charges. It just doesn't. You can just look at the facts of it. So why is she doing this? Who's pulling the strings? That's why the public wants to know. Who's paying for these trips? Well, apparently it's George Soros. He's sort of been identified as this boogeyman, predominantly by the right, by saying, he's paying for all of these things. He's entitled to spend his money how he wants to, But if you're an elected public official, you're a prosecutor, we're also entitled to know where you're going and who's paying for it, especially if you're doing it on office time. So Kim Gardner is a bad prosecutor. That's the end of that one. So last story I want to leave with today. All right, we've had a lot, right? We talked about George Floyd, talked about the bad police officers, the bad popo, the gangs in the LAPD. We talked about the bad popo, the NYPD cop. We talked about the bad prosecutor, Kim Gardner out of St. Louis. Now we're talking about a bad politician, and this is the mega bad politician. Specifically, we're talking about a bad president. Oh my goodness. The Epstein documents got released this past week. There were over 2,000 pages that were in the documents. I will tell you this, I did not read them all. I did not read through it, but I did troll through Twitter and I saw some good outtakes from a couple people. So Bill Clinton comes up in a witness interview in the Epstein documents, and here's what we have from it. He was at Epstein's Island with Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, and 2 young girls. Here is the conversation. So the victim says, he told me a long time ago that everyone owes him favors. He's referring to Jeffrey Epstein. They're all in each other's pockets. When you say you asked him, why is Bill Clinton here? Where was here on the island? When you were present with Jeffrey Epstein and Bill Clinton on the island, who else was there? Ghislaine, Emmy, and there were 2 young girls that I could identify. I never really knew them well anyways. It was just 2 girls from New York. And were all of you staying at Jeffrey's house on the island, including Bill Clinton? That's correct. He had about 4 or 5 different villas on his island, separate from the main house, and we all stayed in the villas. Were sexual orgies a regular occurrence on the island at Jeffrey's house? Yes. Yes. So that is kind of a bombshell in my mind, right? It's something that I thought, I was like, whoa, that's a pretty big claim. Saw the Netflix documentary, but this is this is court documents. This is from an interview, from a deposition, from something going on, and there's testimony on the record that a witness is identifying Bill Clinton in official court documents on the Epstein Island with a number of young girls. This is another one. This comes from Adam Classfeld reports. And he put this one up. 6 references to Bill Clinton and Virginia Roberts' chat with her lawyers on April 7th. Asked about Epstein broadcasting, Bill Clinton owes me favors. She said, yes, I do. It was just a laugh, though. He would laugh it off. I didn't know if he was serious. It was just a joke. So the questioner asks just a few other follow-up things I want to ask you. And again, if any of these questions are questions you're uncomfortable in responding to, then don't hesitate to tell me that. Do you have any recollection of Jeffrey Epstein specifically telling you that Bill Clinton owes me favors? Yes, I do. It was a laugh, though. He would laugh it off. I remember asking Jeffrey, what's Bill Clinton doing here kind of thing? And he laughed it off and said, well, he owes me a favor. He never told me what the favors were. I never knew. I didn't know if he was serious. It was just a joke, which, to me, they're talking about something that is beside the point. What is the favor? Does that matter? It doesn't. The fact that they're having a conversation about Bill Clinton being there is what matters. He was there. They were talking about why he was there. That's kind of not important. The fact is he was there, and she's testifying about that. And the fact that she's detailing a conversation sort of lends credibility to the fact that he probably was there. Later in that interview, she tells him, he told me a long time ago that everyone owes him favors. They're all in each other's pockets. When you say you asked him why he was here, where was here on the island, that goes through it again, the same type of thing. These are 2 documents. So these don't come from the actual court documents, but these are other documents that have been released. These are flight logs saying that Bill Clinton was on Epstein's plane, which of course is here, right? So on line 136, we've got the people who were on the plane: President Bill Clinton. We've got Chris Tucker. We've got JE is going to be Jeffrey Epstein. GM is going to be Ghislaine Maxwell. We've got Kevin Spacey, who's on the plane going with them. This is another flight log. Bill Clinton, 4 Secret Service members, 1 female. Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, SK. Got a couple other people there. So this was quite a big revelation in my mind. I didn't see a lot of news about this, but from what I've seen, Bill Clinton has indicated that he has never been on that island, never been on the island. And that witness says differently. It's in court documents, and she's got a couple stories to corroborate that. It sounds like there were other people there, so there may be other witnesses to corroborate that once this investigation continues on. It's like a little spider web that is going through. So we're going to see where it leads. You know, I don't know why people don't trust Bill Clinton. It's kind of one of those things that is strange, because the last time he lied, oh yeah, it was about sex. Yeah, I forgot about that. Remember this? Remember that one? Remember when he's talking about, oh boy, Mr. Bill Clinton. Let's see. Do I have this clip? I don't have the clip. But Bill Clinton, you know, he's remember when he's in front of the press corps saying, I did not have sexual relations with that woman, Monica Lewinsky, Miss Lewinsky. So maybe there's good reason not to believe anything that he says. Now, of course, we got to wrap up the show with the meme of the week. Remember last week we talked about Bill Barr and the entire debacle of the testimony that he gave in front of the House Judiciary Committee? Well, we got a meme of the week here, folks. Let's take a look.
Now, Mr. Barr, are you investigating Donald Trump for commuting the prison sentence of his longtime friend and political advisor, Roger Stone?
No.
Why not?
Why should I? Woo! Y'all gonna make me lose my mind. Up in here.
Oh, that was really loud. Really loud. Apologies for that. But yeah, I mean, why should he? Thug Life, Bill Barr. Why should he prosecute somebody because of a political spectacle that the House Democrats wanted to give him? So that's it for the show, everybody. Let's take a look, see if we have any comments, see what is going on in the comment world over in YouTube. So let me pull these up and see if anybody had anything that they wanted to chime in about. All right, so offering to roll down the windows is not a sign of malice. Hi. Yeah, so we don't have a whole lot to talk about on that channel. If you joined us today, so happy that you're here. Really appreciate it. Quick reminder to subscribe, share this video, share these this message, this show with friends or family, anybody that you want to communicate with, anybody who's interested in criminal justice reform. This is a good place to do it. I love comments. I love feedback. If you want to leave some comments below this video, I do read them. So, drop those. I don't respond to all of them, but I do read them, and I want to appreciate you. Thank you for being here. If you haven't already, I want to remind you about my book. It's called Beginning to Winning: How to Fight Your Case and Succeed in the Criminal Justice System. And it's got a lot in here for people who've been actually charged with crimes. So, it's not a sort of a leisurely Saturday afternoon reading book, but if you've been charged with a crime or you know somebody who's been charged with a crime, our whole system is in here. We've got these 9 steps, this framework that you can use to have success in your case. It doesn't have to be in Arizona. It's applicable to the entire country because it's just good principles. It's the 9 things that you need to do in any criminal case, because it doesn't matter if you're from Arizona or California or Florida or New York. We all have one United States Constitution, and our laws all sort of emanate from that. So it works anywhere you want. It's available on Amazon. It's $16.99. If you want to call our office or schedule a case evaluation, if you're in Arizona and we can help you, those are absolutely free. We'll give you a copy when you come in. Not a big deal. So I really enjoyed being here today. Hope you enjoyed the show. Thank you so much. One more time, subscribe, like, and share this video. It really, really helps me out. I appreciate you being here. I'll see you next week, same time on Watching the Watchers. Have a good night.